Welcome to the Friday Habit with Marc Labriola and Benjamin Manley. The Friday Habit is for small business owners, freelancers, and creatives who are ready to take their business to the next level. Join us as we discover how to apply the strategies we learned to grow our businesses, make more money, and live every day like it's Friday. All right, and welcome to the Friday Habit. Today, I'm excited for our guest. Eric Huberman is the founder and CEO of Hawk Media, one of the fastest growing marketing consultancies in the United States. What a bold statement.
Not my own statement, thankfully.
You're like, I've got a PR team.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and some third parties that have validated it, but yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, hey, man, welcome to the Friday Habit. We have a lot of small business owners, creatives,
Awesome.
and other entrepreneurs that listen to the show. And when I came across your stuff, I was like, hey, this seems like you're several steps ahead of like where Ben and I are, and it would be great just to kind of pick your brain and hear your story and all that. So,
Sure.
But first, we like to kind of get started. With a little would you rather question. So
Good.
the one I got today is, would you rather wrestle a bear or wrestle an alligator?
Ooh. I feel like alligator is more like you can live. You're more likely to live through wrestling an alligator, but obviously a bear is like soft and cuddly, so that's a tough one. But I think like I do want to live, so I think I'd take the alligator.
I feel like that's probably why. I've never heard of a thing where it's like, hey, bear wrestling, come watch the bear wrestling. I don't think that's like a
Right.
thing. So
By the way, I literally just saw a TikTok video last night, which is, I was totally being productive last night, but of a guy that like rescues, I think that they were crocodiles, but like rescues them when they're like found in people's yards and then like brings them in. And like, he's just hanging out in a pool with like 5 crocodiles that was explaining how they like grow to trust him. So like, that's fresh in my head that I'm like, I could maybe get the alligator to trust me in a wrestling match. I don't know.
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and it almost feels like not that you could overpower an alligator, because I understand that they're like, they'll chomp a rhinoceros in like one bite.
Yeah.
But I feel like a bear, man, it seems like he's got too many limbs to maybe
Yeah, I mean,
fight you with, and
there's no
you
fighting
could
a bear.
swing around the. Yeah, it's like you could maybe like swing around the back of an alligator and get him in a weird angle where
Right.
his neck doesn't move or something. Like,
Oh yeah, and on land, I
There's-
feel like I got him. Like the thing is, if I'm in the water with an alligator, I'd be concerned. But like if I'm on
Sure.
land, I
Right.
feel like
Yeah,
I can like cut left and like get its tail or something. Like there's an option there.
Yeah.
Bear, I'm not. The only thing I've heard about bears is either you play dead and maybe you run downhill temporarily because they have shorter front legs, so they stumble downhill, but they still run like 35
Interesting.
miles an hour. I
Yeah.
grew up in the mountains. I know too much about bears.
So fast. Yeah.
big bear knowledge
Yeah,
guy.
exactly. Good question. We teed this one up.
Oh man. Well, hey, I'd love to hear. Where are you located, actually?
Now I'm in Santa Monica, California.
Okay. Now. Okay.
Well, I'm just saying because I
So
said I
you-
grew up in the
you-
mountains. It's not necessarily the mountains. So I think there's probably a couple bears around.
Yeah. Isn't there like Tahoe or something like
Well,
that?
that's
as a
far. That's
mountain?
7 hours away or something.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So then, are you from California originally?
Yeah,
though?
I'm from a small town called Ojai. It's like near Santa Barbara.
Okay.
But it's up in the mountains.
Okay. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. I live really close to the mountains in Colorado.
Nice. So you probably see a
and
few
then-
bears. Maybe not as many alligators.
I've seen some bears.
Yeah.
Yeah. My dad lives in Florida, so I do
Oh,
see
there you go.
alligators from time to time.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and then Ben, I don't. There's hills
Yeah, we
in
got
Virginia.
some nice
so-
rolling mountains, the Blue Ridge here, and we've got. Right before we bought our house, we saw somebody post online like, "Hey, check out this family of bears," and it was like in the neighborhood that we just bought. I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool,
you go.
good to know." There's bears in our neighborhood. Haven't seen any since.
They're
but
migrating during COVID too. They're all over the place
I
now.
guess so.
Exactly. Well, hey, Eric, I'd love to just hear a little bit of your origin story, kind of like, how you got into kind of the creative services industry, and then, how you started your agency, and then kind of just how you've grown over the past several years.
Yeah, so it is pretty random. I went to U of A, University of Arizona for school, graduated in '08, knew that my life calling and career was going to be in real estate. and spent the summer getting my real estate license. And I got a job as a commercial real estate agent at a great firm and started exactly 1 week to the day before the entire banking industry collapsed and Lehman Brothers went bankrupt. And thankfully, I would say at that time, nobody knew what that meant. Like, you never know in the it's kind of like when everyone went home on March 13th from COVID, and it's like, yeah, it'll be 2 weeks. What was, it was, I forgot what they said, but flatten the curve, deal. 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Like, so same kind of thing. We're like, oh, whatever. There's, oh, wait, 150-year-old banks don't go bankrupt all the time. This isn't normal. And so so I went into that. That year, I made $350, which I don't know if anyone knows about the cost of living in LA, but $350 a year is not enough. And so
that'll get you maybe like a couple weeks of lattes.
I'm pretty sure a Happy Meal McDonald's costs $350 now. Inflation's been rough, but it's a tank of gas. Let's put it that way.
Right.
But yeah, so did not go so well. About 6 months in, I started scrambling in a way of trying to figure out what I was going to do. I knew this wasn't going to be sustainable. I was racking up credit card debt to live off of. And so I ended up, long story short, launching an online music company with a friend's dad who was a very prominent entrepreneur. I didn't know this about my friend's dad. I knew him as my drummer's dad. I was a guitarist growing up and not very good, which is why I didn't pursue it, but I enjoyed it. And he reached out wanting to build an online music company, and I built the business plan. He helped get funding for it, and mid 2009 went full time on it, and he had raised $1 million for us. And so I ran it. I owned 5% of the company, built it for 2 years, got it to profitability. Ended up realizing it was never going to be that big, and it wasn't going to be what would put my future kids through college. So
it wasn't going to be the next iTunes.
No, it wasn't that model. It was more like masterclass for musicians. And the roughest part of it is, marketing to a customer that has no money is not exactly the best business model. That being said, it was profitable, so we weren't going to shut it down. So we brought in a CEO to take over, and I moved on. And then I ended up starting one of the early e-commerce subscription companies. It was called Swag of the Month. It was t-shirt subscription. You fill out a little style quiz, tell us what you like to wear, and every month we send you a t-shirt that fits your style. That went really well. After a year and a half, sold it, joined an incubator called Science that had just launched a company called Dollar Shave Club. Advised for them, advised for a lot of their portfolio, helped them launch an activewear brand, which we sold a year later to Bally Total Fitness, then started advising and consulting to a bunch of brands on how to grow businesses like I had. I had built a reputation. At that point, I'm 26 years old. I'd built and sold 2 e-com companies. I was one of the first movers in sub e-com. Timing and luck is a big factor in success.
Yeah.
And so I built it.
Do you think that your proximity to other entrepreneurs and business people, I mean, being in California, it seems like everyone goes to New York or LA, right? Like they want to pursue their dreams. They go to the big city. So do you feel like, man, because you were in LA, you're around other people that were doing things that you kind of got swept into that, and that's where some of that luck happened?
Absolutely. And I don't mean that it can't happen in other places. Like Denver's got, actually, we have a venture fund now. A lot of our investments are actually in Denver. So, and Virginia's got some incredible companies too. So it's not that it's the only path, but in terms of my path, it had a big impact. So I don't say you're not going to be successful if you're in a smaller place, but New York and LA, the opportunities are just more prominent. And so there's just more people. And that's why even when I see all the migration to Austin and Miami, plenty of opportunity, but it's still the population of Miami is 450,000 people. Los Angeles is 8 million. There's no comparison in terms of just the opportunities that can arise. Now there's other reasons to go there. And if you're the tax reason's interesting, and maybe that shifts, but it's going to take a long time. So, I do believe the good example is, being in LA, I literally met the founders of Science, the incubator with Dollar Shave, at a tech cocktail hour at a bar here that's not here anymore called South, that was in the middle of Santa Monica. And I met them and they're like, oh, you should come by. We should talk a little more. And that's how I ended up working there. And so, yeah, definitely.
Now, as the real estate market started coming back, I mean, because you said you dreamed about being in real estate. So did that kind of just, as things started coming back, we're far down another path, and you decided, I'm just going to keep going down this.
Not really. Path. I could have gone either way, because after Science, when we sold Bally Total Fitness, I actually kind of hated the experience, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do next. And real estate popped into my mind a couple times, but I was kidding myself. I didn't want to be a real estate agent. Investing in real estate's dope, and I own real estate now. That's super fun, having a real estate portfolio. Being the middleman on deals is not. You're dealing with two bosses that can't. It's just So I had this
Yeah.
perception of the job versus the reality of the job. The perception is you're doing deals and you're going, you're running the numbers and you're doing all this research. And the reality is you're herding cats and dealing with a bunch of bullshit. And it's taking forever and things fall through and you don't control anything. And so, yeah, and I think that's a big lesson in a lot of jobs is like there's a perception and reality of the actual job and what the hard parts are. And the hard parts have to be worth it. Just like the hard parts of running
Right.
an agency. People think that my job is to like walk into a room with a whiteboard and draw a really creative, like I put up the poster board with this is the gecko. Geico, you're now a gecko. Like that's the job. That's not the fucking job. So and that's what you learn as you get into it, which I encourage anyone in their teens and 20s, like go try a bunch of jobs that you think sound cool and learn what the downside is, because then you find out what's worth it. And I think that's the important part. But yeah, no, so real estate, I always wanted to invest. In fact, when I started Hawk, my original strategy was cash flow Hawk Media and take that money and put it into real estate. And that transformed, which we can get into. But
yeah.
yeah.
So you kind of, when you say you kind of had a bad experience, or not that you had a bad experience, but you were kind of over it by the time the whole Bally's Fitness thing happened and all that.
They made a lot of really poor decisions on that business. It should have been a lot bigger. And I was not the main owner. I was an owner, but I was not the decision maker. I worked for science in some senses. And so I was like, they made some really bad decisions and they screwed up our supply chain, things that had nothing to do with. And so it really pissed me off because it was one of those situations where we screwed it up ourselves. Like it wasn't the market. All the things you would hope for, like, traction and market demand and total addressable market and good returns on marketing and everything that's hard to do, we had easy. And then they decided to vertically integrate our supply chain and blow all of our funding and end up underwater. And we couldn't afford to keep going on the things we were investing in. Like, it was a disaster. So we ended up out of it. But
where did this, to me, just hearing you talk and stuff, I mean, obviously, like at a young age, there was some sort of entrepreneurial spirit within you. I mean, because even being a real estate agent is an entrepreneurial endeavor, right? You're self-employed and you're kind of making your own deals and doing things like that. Did you grow up in a home that was encouraged, or were your parents entrepreneurs?
Yep, all the above. My dad was an entrepreneur, and he a very successful one as I grew up. And I'm also the oldest, so frankly, he was incredibly hard on me in a way that I appreciate later in life, because I could have, for lack of a better word, I could have easily grown up to be like the spoiled rich kid waiting for his inheritance. And instead, I was told from like 8 years old is when he started telling me I better get a fucking job. And I'm getting none of the money. It's going to the dog. And I'd ask for things and he'd be like, you better fucking work for it. And even like, I remember getting a phone call sophomore year of college in November, and I'll never forget this. And now I keep it fresh in my mind. He calls me and my dad had a temper, and I could always, and I just to be clear, I was also very close to him, but he calls me and he goes, what are you doing? And I knew that tone. I was like, oh, here we go. I'm like,
you're like, oh crap.
Class. Like, it was in Arizona. It was November. He goes, yeah, but what's your plan this summer? It's fucking November. I'm like, I gotta tell you, I don't know yet. I'm probably gonna get a job. He's like, you're probably gonna get a job, Eric? You're 19 years old now. It's time to get off the family tit. Go figure out what the fuck you're doing with your life. I'm like, okay, sounds good. So there was a tone that was up until the point that I didn't need any. My dad did pay for college until I didn't need anything from them, and even after that I still got a little bit of jabs here and there that I appreciate. It gave me a chip on my shoulder that I like, because it's this innate desire to grow things and build things and keep going. And it's not about the money. It's not about because I can drive a fancy car. In fact, I downgraded my last car. I was like, fuck it, I went with a Tesla Model 3, which is not a bad car, don't get me wrong. I don't want to be pretentious about it, but I was looking at really nice cars and went, I just want something that can be a daily driver that I can rely on. Like, it's like, that's not why I do this, but growing and building. And it put this chip on my shoulder that I always need to be beating myself and always need to be going, which I like. It's not something, it's not a disability. It's not a mental challenge, because I enjoy it. So.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I feel like, and I don't know, Ben, do you feel like, I think that with you, Ben, I feel like there's this sense of like, wanting to like build something, grow something, like, you've always got ideas. And I think it's for me, it's that idea of like, I want to achieve, like I want to like hit that next level of success. And I think sometimes that can be a detriment, because then I get in my head about things, or I get depressed because I'm not growing as fast enough, or, whatever that is. But in the same way, I think it puts a drive in me to like also like want to succeed and not just have status quo or just go with, the flow.
Yeah. And I will say, maybe it's an unpopular opinion, but I don't know that stress is a bad thing, because I think without that challenge and without that downside, the upsides don't feel that great either. And so I think like the challenge, it's the challenge to work through it and to and like all the shit you deal with, and like, whatever it is running a business, a bad employee, an angry client, and then it gets worse. And as you get bigger, it gets worse. Mark Zuckerberg's dealing with like geopolitical problems and getting sued and changing the name of the company. And like, he's the richest guy in California, has not gotten through this. So it never ends. And that's something that has been probably the most important lesson I've learned in business. But if you don't have those challenges, then when you have the wins, they kind of don't feel great either. Like, you have to have that challenge. And it's, frankly, my wife hates camping and I love it. And I've tried to explain it to her. It's like, it's about when you get back and you take that shower and you have that good meal and you just feel great. Like, the actual camping's fun, or getting away is fun, but like being down and dirty and that aspect of it, it's not because I enjoy sleeping on the ground. It's because how good it feels when you get back is like the part that you remember. And so, yeah, it's the same thing. I think like going through those challenges, like we've thankfully had the opportunity I could sell this company, and I've been offered many times for more than my grandkids would need, but that's not the goal. It's not about just having cash and sitting around. Like, that doesn't sound exciting to me. And that sounds like how you have an early death, kind of like living.
Would you say that you're a competitive person? I'm just curious how you see, like, what is it that drives you? So it sounds like you actually enjoy what you do. So that's part of it, is like the creativity.
That is part of it.
But yeah, do you compete with other people? You're like, hey, I want to win, or is it more like you want to compete with yourself, or how do you think about it?
It's the latter. It's I don't give a shit about other people's success. I actually commend even direct competitors that have a good time. I'm like, high five. I have dinner with most of my direct competitors. Like, good for them. But it is about beating myself. And I will say the only time I find myself competitive with others is when they stand in the way of me beating myself. So if I can grow without worrying about other people, I'm really happy. I'm running my own race, and I'm that way. And like, I've always done more individual sports and stuff. Like, it's always been like competitions about beating myself and doing better the next time than I did the previous time. But when it comes to, then like, if someone's literally standing in the way of me beating myself, that's when it's like, all right, well, I'm going to take you out too.
Gotcha. When you're setting goals, are you usually setting like numerical, like quantifiable goals, or is it something else that you're shooting for? You know what I mean? Like, how do you measure success?
Yeah, it's numerical, because I like having a very objective way of measuring goals. And that can be revenue and profitability goals, because those are easiest scoreboards, but there are a lot of times other indicators as well. Number of clients we're managing, head count, things like that, that we try to look for leading indicators, not just the result.
Yeah, makes sense.
So you were at a consultancy or a what do you want to call it, incubator or whatever it was, right? And then from there,
so got out, went to Mexico for a week because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Came back and started getting offered a bunch of jobs. It turns out that the sort of story I told you up to this point was a good story to a lot of companies and wanted to hire me. And so I was getting offered jobs, and I was like, yeah, but I just went through this situation. I don't want to fucking work for anyone. So one of the companies that offered me to, the company that bought our last company, Ellie, offered me to work there. I was like, I'm not coming to work for you. And he's like, well, why don't you consult? I'm like, all right, I'll consult 1 day a week. And he goes, well, why don't you consult 3 days? No, I want you to consult 3 days a week. It's like, okay, but you got to pay me. It was 26, keep in mind. I think I told him $200 an hour. And I was making $100,000 a year before this. $200 an hour is $400,000 a year if you work full time. And I'm like, yeah, I'll work 3 days a week, but you got to pay $200 an hour. And he goes, yeah, okay, sounds good. I'm like, oh, okay. So he was in East LA, so there was a commute, and I didn't appreciate. But I was like, fuck it, that's more money than I was looking to make. I was used to living off $3,000 a month, because running startups and stuff, that was my budget. And even when I was making $100,000 a year, I was just putting away savings. And so I was looking to just cover $3,000 a month, which was my hope, was to make that working 1 day a week for him, and then I could go figure out what the hell I wanted to do, which at the time was to start a tea company. By the way, I know I'm talking fast. I don't drink caffeine. I didn't then either. And so I thought there was an opportunity there. That was what I was going to pursue. Was going to be my next e-com business, was fitness and health tea. And so, but I was like, yeah, I'll pay the bills working with this guy. Started working with him. Then I got hit up by more and more. And after about, let's just say over the course of 6 months, I now had 8 clients. I had an assistant working for me. I was still working part-time, making I was making I think I was making $30,000 a month, $360,000 a year, with an assistant helping with some stuff, me working out of a Starbucks next to my condo, and an incubator that let me called Amplify that let me have some desk space. They're still great. I actually ended up investing in their fund, their next fund. Um, and yeah, it was just hustling, helping companies as their like fractional CMO. And through that, I'd try to help them hire agencies or hire in-house as they started to execute on the things I was advising for. And I found that, it turns out 99% of agencies are just completely full of shit. And if you're in this industry, I haven't found someone that disagrees with me, which is scary, but it's not even an opinion anymore. It's just fact. And so, and then the few that are good that I found, the ones that I found at least, were really expensive, wanted long contracts, high minimums, something that made them hard to work with. So the end result was I just couldn't find access to great marketing for these people I was working with. So I went, screw it. I'm just going to hire my own little SWAT team, each with their own expertise. So like a Facebook marketer, an email marketer, a web designer, a fractional CMO. And I thankfully had this in my network because 5 years of being in the e-com space. So I grabbed some friends, told them I'd pay them each $3,000 a month because that's all I could afford. And then they'd get upside in the future. They came in, we had a team of 7 people and had enough to pay for a tiny little office about the size of this room. So it's like 200 square feet with a conference table in the middle, and said, great, we're off to the races, and offered my clients, said, hey, everything's a la carte, month to month, cheaper than hiring in-house, but you can spin up what you need when you need it. Let's go. And that was the birth of Hawk Media. That was January of 2014 is when they really fully started. And, it worked right away. And I actually launched that tea company the same month I found a manufacturer in LA and all this stuff. And in the first month, we went from 30 grand in revenue to 65, I think. And the tea company launched and did about 30 grand in revenue. And I looked at the tea company and I looked at the agency, which I planned on just being my little team that could then port over to be the tea company. I went, nope, fuck it. I'm focusing on this. And, that was literally how Hawk Media started. I never didn't write a big business plan that we're going to take over the world. It was just like, I need a quick team. I'm going to do this. And then it worked really fast and went, okay, I need to double down.
So then how, when people started bringing you in for consulting, was it marketing consultant? Like, hey, what do we do? And then where did you get that knowledge, in that area? Because obviously you worked on different deals and things like that, but it's not like you went to formal education or anything like that. So how did that kind of like transpire that you had the knowledge and experience then to start doing these things?
I just asked a lot and I still try. I actually get down on myself for not being as inquisitive as I used to be. Like, I always wanted to learn. And so especially up until I reached a certain point of scale here, I just asked a lot of questions, and I also just went with my gut on things. Like, I'm thankfully, like, I have a really strong logical deduction. Like, that's just a strength of mine, is like taking, like, kind of seeing how things play out and like understanding like sort of the business version of chess in some ways, as well as like I'm super, super rational. That's anyone that works with me says that. Like, I'm the most level-headed person. Everything seems really fair and logical. I actually took the LSAT and got I took the practice LSAT, I should say, and then I bailed on the actual LSAT, but I got like a 171. I could have gone to any school I wanted to if I'd gotten that on the real thing, and then decided I didn't want to be a lawyer. But the point of that is, all through that part of my career, I was looking at like, this doesn't make sense, and I was thankfully built with enough confidence. My mom instilled confidence. I went to a super alternative hippie school that was all about building confidence. So like, I was confident enough in myself that when I thought something was stupid or didn't make sense, then I believed it was stupid or didn't make sense, not like, well, I must be dumb. It was more like, no, I think that's broken, it's probably broken. And so when it came down to like, agencies wanting long-term contracts, me thinking that's broken, I was, let's say, cocky enough to go, why, I think a month-to-month agency should work. It'll probably work. Let's try it. Like, and I had many major agency owners. I talked to a guy that had sold his last 2 agencies for like $50 and $70 million at the time. And that was like, holy shit to me at the time. And I talked to him and he's like, yeah, that'll never work. You can't scale that business. And I'm like, but I think I can. And he's like, no, you can't scale that business. And he's like, I know, I've been in this business for 20 years. That's not doable. And I'm like, okay. 8 years later, I stuck with my guns versus listening to him, thank God, and built a much bigger business than he ever built. So it just comes down to, having that understanding and being confident in that, and then also being willing to have it challenged. Like, I've made mistakes, I've made decisions. There are other parts of the business that I just took for granted. Like, oh, all those agencies are stupid, we're doing it right. And then I'm like, oh no, that's why they do that. Yeah, we need to change what we're doing. So it was just a constant. And I think that's the benefit of when you have entrepreneurs enter a space they're not familiar with. The downside is you don't know, you'll end up with a lot of mistakes that people that know the industry won't. But the other side of the downside is you also end up with people that are in the industry take all the things for granted.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, well, this is just how things are done. And when you deal with those types of people, the creativity goes away and your chances of a real moonshot are a lot lower.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So what did people find value, like when you were first kind of starting out, what did people find value in what you were giving? Was it just that, oh, you knew a graphic designer or a video editor that did really great work and then you could kind of bring them in? Or like, what was it about what you did that was so valuable that people would want to pay?
It was aspirational. It was, oh, you've sold to e-commerce business. Well, I want to build my e-commerce business and sell it. What'd you do? It was really that simple. And then we started executing, and then we transitioned that to, oh, wow, you've worked with these 20 companies. I want to be like them. Can you help me? Oh, wow, you grew these companies and they did really well. Can you help me? And now at this point, like, it's been thousands of brands. It's, just become kind of ubiquitous, but that's how it started.
So it's like almost like credibility that you built up front, partially by working with these other businesses. And then from there, how do you, I was curious about how you continue to add value over time, because I'm thinking, probably the reason a lot of people that have those long-term contracts is they're like, hey, we know that they're not going to stick with us. Like they're going to cancel us as soon as like there's a down month or something. So do you provide like reports, or like how do you prove like every month, like, hey, we're adding lots of value, or is that something they just kind of like?
And this is where it's not as complicated as you just made it. Yes, we have to report, we have to communicate well. Like that's probably more critical than even doing good work, which is also critical.
Right.
But it's like being an employee, though slightly more disposable, I'd say. So like if your email marketing's working and you don't have a reason to target it, you're not just going to fire them 2 months in. You don't want to do that. That's a pain. Who's going to do it then? So when we get fired, it's because people find alternatives or have reasons to leave. And don't get me wrong, there are also plenty of people that hire us on month to month. They're way too sold on that idea and they like come in for a month and leave and like, great. It's like, opening your doors to your store and going like, ha ha, like you did nothing. Congratulations. You just wasted our time and yours, but it happens. We do try to set expectations at a time for that. But other than that, no, we just, when we get fired, it's either the business is struggling or we're not meshing well or some, there's a bunch of other factors, but it's, and then a lot of people do hire us for short term because they want to try bringing certain things in house and things change. And also we're dealing with a lot of first time entrepreneurs that make really poor decisions sometimes. And we are dealing with that too. But because this is how we built our business, it's part of the business model, and we know how to work with that.
Cool.
So then would you say that was e-commerce kind of like your initial target because you were working on the tea company, things like that? And so was that kind of...
I'd say it was less target and more network. Like most of my business for a long time was just in my network. People referring me, oh, you should talk to these guys. Oh, you should talk to these guys. And it just started to grow from there. And I was an e-commerce leader. So I had a lot of peers in the space. I had a lot of friends of peers, and then it just grew from there. So that's always been a big part of our business because it's where we started and where I started.
Yeah. So then how, when you started fleshing out this idea as far as being like, all right, we are going to be like a marketing department for a company, how did you, kind of work your way into companies that maybe were more established or that already had marketing departments and whatnot? Obviously, if you're working with an entrepreneur or some small brand, right, they need all that help. But if you're working with maybe a larger brand or bigger company, did you ever run into people feeling threatened by, their boss hiring you or things like that?
Generally, and it still happens. It's generally the most insecure marketing leaders are threatened by us. And when we use the term outsourced CMO, there are insecure CMOs that go, you're not taking my job. Fuck. We've had literally CMOs say, fuck you. I'm not going to talk to you guys. You're trying to take my job. Like they're that insecure. Good luck. I don't want to work with them anyways. And thank God there's plenty of business out there. Mostly the vast majority understand it, understand the value of what we're talking about, and it doesn't turn them off. And the few that do are exactly who I don't want to work with. So we debated it at times because we got a little bit of negative feedback, and we're like, no, but that's exactly who I don't want as a client, is that insecure asshole that can't get away, that doesn't think rationally and just goes, oh God, like that's not what you want to work with as a marketer.
Right. So then as far as, you started out with you and a handful of your friends, that you started working, and each one of those people had maybe different skills that you didn't have, so that you could kind of offer like a full package,
Yep.
to sell essentially. So then as you started to grow, what did that look like as far as, when you'd hire or, bring on a new client that maybe needed, digital marketing, and you weren't doing that? Did you then go out and find somebody and hire somebody to do digital marketing for you? Or like, you obviously grew from very small to a very large,
Yep.
employee count. So, how did that all
Yeah, it was super reactive.
evolve?
And every time we tried to get proactive is when we got fucked up. So, meaning like, oh, we're
Huh.
probably going to get to here, so we should anticipate it and hire ahead. It was just like, no, we need this now, get it now. And so that's where we've done well. And it's, we have too many email clients, we need a second one. Oh, now we have too many email clients, we need a third. Now we have too many email marketers, we need a manager. Let's promote one of them. Like, it's just started.
Yeah.
It was, again, just, I spend a lot of my time with other entrepreneurs and exposing myself to how businesses operate. And thankfully, my business, part of our job is to learn how other businesses operate. And you start
Yeah.
to pull a lot from there and go, oh, okay, so this makes sense. And then again, it's about that sort of logical deduction of like, hey, every time a manager exceeds 7 people, they seem like their hair is on fire. So why don't we just cut it off at 7? Like, if you're a manager, you get 7 people or less. The moment we have 8, we need 2 managers. Like, let's just do that. And so those are the kind of things that we started to look at, as like, how many people can someone manage in different roles? And then, and you, over time, you improve and tweak and tweak and tweak. And then now we're almost 8 years into this, and 270 people, and we've got, some systems in place over time. And I will say, one of the biggest frustrating things is, systems also break. You'll put something together, and then all of a sudden you've added 100 people, and none of them knew about the system, and they stop following it, and you have to restart, and you have to, or create a new system because it doesn't work at scale. But so it's a constant moving target. There's no finish line, but you just constantly ebb and flow. And my business partner used to articulate it. It feels less now this way than it used to, but it's like walking an elephant down a narrow path where you're just like dodging back and forth and like, oh no, go a little to the left, no, a little to the right, and you're like trying to like keep it on path while it's constantly fucking up. And like that is how it felt at times. Now it's a lot more stable now, but that was probably the first 6 years of business like that.
Yeah. Was there a point in your business where it felt like, man, you're chugging along, and then there was something in particular that you felt like the rocket fuel hit, and you guys were like, boom, it just like connected?
No, it's incremental steps along the way. So it's, people think of it as like either a growth curve or a linear growth,
Yeah.
and ours was more like a staircase, flat line
Okay.
up, flat line up, and it's a bit different. It happened every few months to every year, whatever that is. We'll
Yeah.
be stuck at a certain revenue cap and just churning along in there, and then all of a sudden, boom, we'll break through into a new strategy works, and it adds another enough revenue to break through that. And it's just constantly figuring out what's that next breakthrough you need to have while maintaining all the other shit that you did.
Right. Right. When growing, the company, how did you determine, this is something I'm always curious about, like, because we have a small team, but right now it's kind of like how I'm hiring people is based off of like, okay, can we afford to hire another person? Like, if we bring on another client, then I have, maybe I need to bring on 2 clients to hire 1 person, So like, what does that look like? What kind of advice would you give, or, experience that you have as far as like growing your team so that you obviously the company can afford it and also, be profitable?
Yeah, it's manage your financials. I mean, you got to be a numbers person to run a business, and you have to like actually watch like what is your gross margin on your execution? How much does it cost you to service a client versus how much you make, and make sure you have the right margins. And different agencies have different margins, so there's not really a right answer there. It depends on how you operate, but you have to build a business model after a little while. You can't just fly by the seat of your pants. If it's something you want to scale, you have to build a model and project out, what does this look like if we're 1,000 people, 10,000 people? And then in terms of hiring, the more, every agency is different there too. The more predictable your revenue is, the better. And you just have to figure out, like, again, I'm a fan of not hiring ahead. I'd rather teach my people and tell my people there's going to be times where the workload's going to get a little much until we can hire some people to support you, versus hiring ahead and not hitting your targets and now having to fire people. So
Yeah.
that's kind of the alternative. So that's, how we've consistently built it, is through that, is like modeling. And now we have really predictable, we have very, very predictable revenue and projections and all that. And we know kind of where we're going. So we're able to get ahead of it.
When you first started, were you kind of like the jack of all trades, essentially? Like, did you kind of just dabble in everything, or was there a particular medium that you kind of focused on and then expanded as you grew?
So very, very early, one of my first hires became my business partner. So he was originally our first fractional CMO. He was the guy that ran the music company for 3 years after I left.
Okay.
Was our first CMO because he had run digital businesses, knew how to advise there. Then he quickly became my quote unquote director of operations because he was just managing everyone else because he was had to report against their work. And so he just started managing the team and basically said, you go grow it, you go get new deals, go be the guy out there building this, and I'll be the one that helps on delivery. And that's how we started. And then, he became a partner, and then he became a much more significant partner a year and a half later, where when it was like, we looked back and I was like, yeah, no, you've been my partner. And so from there, as he put it, I made promises and he delivered on them. So my job was to be out and about all the time. I was at a different event every night. I was constantly talking to new prospects. And in 3.5 years into the business, we were, 7 million run rate, probably 60 people or something. And I was still driving about 85% of our sales by myself. Wow. And then that's when we transitioned and I started building out a better sales team and figuring out how I couldn't, basically said, I can't be the salesperson anymore.
Right.
So
then,
I was just going to say, I was curious what your kind of day-to-day looks like right now, how your responsibilities kind of break down, how much you get into details with certain clients or projects internally, and how you kind of split that time up.
Yeah, I try not to get as much details anymore because I've got an incredible executive team. I just brought on a COO 2 months ago that is responsible for basically managing the day-to-day. And so he's only 4 months in with the consulting. And so I'm still staying involved to make sure that he catches things I would normally catch because there's a lot of nuance. But about a third of my time is with that team, on strategy and figuring out hey, here's a new idea to how to build out marketing. Here's figuring out a place to grow. About a third of my time is actually on expansion, M&A, our venture fund, our financing arm, other initiatives in the company, whether it's new channels we can launch, new territories. I'm looking at international expansion. We just opened in Canada. We're looking at China and Singapore and UK and all over the place. So that's a lot of the new exploratory stuff is on me. And then about a third of my time is on promotional, being on a podcast, writing a book, waving the flag, beating the drum, basically.
That's awesome. So, what's this idea as far as how does someone know when they're ready to outsource their marketing? What happens internally where someone's like, all right, I need to hire someone or bring somebody in.
So my view is if you're a brand, you shouldn't hire anyone until you got about 10 grand a month to spend on marketing, at least. Because if you, and consistently, because if not, you haven't built your business yet. And as a founder, you need to be able to get it there. I'm pretty adamant about that. If you can't drive 10 grand a month in profit yourself.
Now, what's that number? Why is 10 grand okay? If you can't spend 10 grand a month,
maybe it's 9, maybe it's 11, but it's a ballpark.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's around there that you have enough ammo to actually hire someone and still have some have a war chest for them. Because you hire someone for 5 grand a month, it's 60 grand person, let's say, and then you have no other budget. What the fuck are they doing all day? You think they're gonna do a better job growing than you are? You've given them no resources. So, it's somewhere around that 10 grand a month. It's enough to start looking at some options. And I see a lot of people jumping on, I have $500. Who can do my SEO? You're not going to get any return for that. Stupid thing to do.
Right.
So take that $500, keep it in your pocket, go out and sell a few people. Go make another $1,000. If you can't do that with your business, you're the wrong founder. That's my view. And we even put it when we invest, we look for companies that have gotten to 20 grand a month in revenue on their own before we invest. And
nice.
And so that's the first part of that. I'd say you start there. And then in terms of outsourcing versus in-housing, there's 3 issues with bringing people in-house. Number 1, getting good talent. If your company isn't one of the sexiest startups out there or some Fortune 2000 that's amazing, what type of person, you have to be real with yourself sometimes. Who's joining your team? Are they really the best marketer out there that gives you the best opportunity? And there's a line I heard a long time ago. If you want to win a Super Bowl, build a team of people that have already won a Super Bowl. That's a really easy way to do it. You see it in NBA all the time too. Championship teams are built by a bunch of guys that have won championships. A lot. Happens a lot. was the Warriors, it was the Heat, it's I guess the Lakers. Like it's all these teams bring in a bunch of people, and that's how they do it. So same thing in business. You want to win, get the winners. You see it with the best funded tech companies. The people they're recruiting, their CFO came from this company that IPO'd for this, and like they're grabbing people that are winners. Same thing goes with your marketing. If you want to be a winner, you have to hire people that have won. And when you've got 10 grand a month in marketing spend, who are you attracting that is actually going to be a winner? And that's the problem with in-housing early on, in my opinion, versus an agency. And I mean, it's a shameless plug, but at the same time, the exact reason I built the company is that's why we exist. Is we've done this. We've taken companies from zero to billions of dollars, and yet on principle and how we've built our agency is we still want to work with up-and-coming brands. It's fun for us. It's why we exist. It's our purpose. And so we continue to bring Fortune 500 marketing to the masses in a sense. And that is something that we're not the only ones, and that is something that I think is important. So I think with the right partner, assuming you don't run into the 99% of agencies that are full of shit, outsourcing in the beginning is probably the move. And then over time, you can probably attract some good people that you can bring some of it in-house. And then the smartest marketers I know this is true, and anyone that would argue it, I would say is not a good marketer. It is a balance. It's not binary. You want some in-house and some outsourced all the time, because we're always going to have a better view of the forest from the trees. We're going to know what's going on in the industry. We have all our benchmarking data and everything that we know what's affecting. We're getting better treatment from all the platforms. We're getting certain discounts that you'll never get. We have certain talent you'll never attract. And we're cost effective. Like you're not like good luck hiring one of our email marketers for, under 3 times the price. And do they really want to come work for your brand if you're not one of the top startups out there? No. So these are things that we can benefit from. On the other side, there are definitely things that are better held internally and strategically, and that changes over the cycle of the business. It could be social media management at some points. It could be your email marketing, but not all the time. And it, again, depends on what you're able to attract. It could be your content creation, maybe, if you're a good content creator, can get one. Because if you can't, making bad content is a waste of fucking time, too. So it just depends on your access, too. But over time, that ebbs and flows and changes.
What's the average price range to interact, with an agency like yours? I mean, is there a range from like, $2,000 to $100,000 a month?
That's
like, what does that look like?
I mean, we have a few bigger than that, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So it's kind of like you'll take anybody who's a good fit, for the agency.
Yeah, on principle, we try not to be the gatekeeper. That's like our mission is accessibility to great marketing for everyone. That is what we're striving for, is like, how do we make this accessible, but also become the best at what we do? So why I say that is we still need to price accordingly to be able to serve as a client. We still need to do certain things that allow us to also be great, but we want, that balance of great and accessible is always what we're teetering on, and making sure that we're also easy to work with and flexible and cost effective.
Yeah. I was curious, did you get married pretty young, or do you have kids? No
kids. I met my wife a month after I started the company. We dated for 3.5 years, got engaged after 3.5 years, got married after 5 years. And so we've been married to almost 3 years.
Okay. But been together, and she's pretty supportive as a partner.
Yeah, no, thankfully, more than supportive. She's an enabler in a lot of ways, but she's also a senior exec at a big private equity fund. So it was always a mutual respect of the hustle, so to speak. And she works, at times harder than I do. And I'm still at the company known to be the hardest working guy here today. Like, we both work our butts off and enjoy it. But now working from home's fun, because she's like, if I have a 10-minute break, I can walk inside and hang out with my wife for a while. Good news is we like each other. COVID hit, we got stuck together, and it's worked out. So
what with speaking of COVID, how did that affect you guys? Did you have a physical location, like a big office and whatnot? And then how has that affected you, and what kind of decisions have you made to kind of pivot and move forward?
Yeah, so we've got a massive office almost exactly a year before COVID hit. We put millions of dollars into it. It was costing us $1.5 million a year to rent, plus all the TIs and stuff we had put into it. And we went home and left it empty. And after about 3 months, I saw my team was stressed out, because working remote was not a problem for us. Our clients were almost always remote anyways. So it's just like all of a sudden they just weren't sitting next to each other too. And we had to all use Google Hangouts, which we all used all day anyways. So it was like, no big deal. We didn't miss a beat. business was affected slightly in the beginning of COVID, but not really. And we were like, we had a record month in June of 2020. So we lost 25% of our clients in April of 2020, but we replaced 10% of those. So we dipped about 15%, recovered in May, record month in June. So like in the time, just to be clear, the first 2 weeks of COVID were like the most stressful 2 weeks of my fucking life. I didn't know when that bleeding would stop. Now, looking back, obviously hindsight's 2020, everyone that was going to fire us fired us right away. Most people, it wasn't going to trickle in for 6 months. Like, that's not how this was going to work. It was going to be like, shit's shut down, we're done, or not. So I wasn't sure if I was seeing a trend or a one-time event, and that's what caused stress. After a couple of weeks, we got the PPP, we did all that stuff, and we were like, okay, we're solid at least for the next 3 months. Who knows what the fuck's going to happen to the world, but we're going to be okay, at least for now. So once that subsided, then again, July hit, and I was like, well, we're now working remote fine. Everyone's stressed out about, are we ever going back to the office? When are we going back? So why not make this easy? Let's do a vote. Who wants to go back? 84% said never. And so, or that, I shouldn't say never, said they didn't want to be in the office even the majority of the time, meaning like, we might want to be in an office one day a week. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to own a fucking office for one day a week. So,
Right.
so we got rid of it. And it took us a year, frankly, to get out of that lease, and we had 4 years left on it. So we still saved 3 years, which was great savings. Saved $1.5 million a year right there.
Right.
So we got rid of that. And then, I'd say a year later, this summer, things started to open up a little bit. People started feeling more comfortable. And that's when some people were like, hey, we want to work together more. We want to have a chance to get together. And we were able to secure a deal with WeWork that was really reasonable. And so we got our entire staff WeWork passes. The problem is, and not for WeWork, just in general, when we said go, hey, we're going remote, do whatever you want, we meant it. But now instead of 90% of our team being in LA, 30% of our team's in California as a whole, the rest is in 40 different states. So and in Canada and in China. So, and in Philippines. So there, and probably other places I don't know about, because I know sometimes I found out one of our employees was working from Jamaica for a little while. So, and by the way, awesome. Like, the cool thing is it's exactly as great as it sounds, because they're all getting their shit done. And thankfully we work in a business where they've got plenty of bosses other than me. If they're not doing a good job, we'll hear about it. So as long as they're doing their work and they're doing a great job, then I want them to live well. Go take that. Like, my brother is 9 years younger than me. And so a lot of his friends are like more the younger employees at our company. And he was telling me when COVID hit and we sent everyone home, and he's like, some of your team's hanging out at the beach, like middle of the day, just going to the beach. I'm like, yeah, and their clients are happy. So good for them. Go power to them. And so we've tried to create an environment where that allows for all that. And it's been working. Like, our employee satisfaction's way up. We've seen way less employee churn this year than we have the past couple of years, which is ironic, seeing that the Great Resignation happened this year. We've seen some of that, but just But a lot of the other stuff we used to lose people for, like, people seem happy. And I'm on a lot of calls with our team, and they just seem like, for the most part, they're enjoying it. And they've now, the people that didn't like the change of like being remote and all this have left. And we're even getting more boomerangs, as we call it, than ever before. A lot of people leaving for other jobs and calling us back going, can I please come back? And if they leave on good terms, we do welcome it.
Yeah. Wow, that's really great. Well, tell us a little bit about your new book that's coming out, and what it's about, and where people can get it and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so it's cool because I think so basically we wrote a book. We have this whole marketing thesis and methodology around how we manage marketing, how we assess companies' marketing, that we have been using since we built Hawk, and we use it for ourselves. We drink our own punch. And it actually has helped me over and over again assess what's wrong with the company and what's wrong with our own company, and then dive in deeper. And so basically just got help from a ghostwriter and dictated and took 2 years to put together a book of putting all that was in our head and the methodology we've created and putting it into words. And it's now pre-launched. So Hawk Method is what we're calling it. Hawkmethod.com, HAWKE method. And for the listeners that want to see how we think about marketing, it's helpful. But also for agencies that want to see how to position yourselves in the way you think about things, I think it can be helpful too, because we've basically turned our marketing theories into now a book that it's being. We've got several universities now picking it up for their marketing majors. Like, we've put it out there and it's 200 pages, easy read. Like, it's a small 200-page book, meaning like not a textbook. And so the idea is it's a conversational language. It's easy to read. It's got a lot of narrative. It's how we think about marketing we've grown over 3,000 brands successfully at this point. So
that's awesome. That's cool. So is that on pre-order? Where can people get it?
Talkmethod.com. And our goal is to sell.
Okay.
We got to pre-sell 20,000 copies to guarantee it, or not to guarantee, but to have a solid shot at the New York Times bestseller, which is the goal. Yeah. So we've got till February to sell 20,000 copies. So looking forward to getting them out there.
Yeah,
it's the new challenge of the day, so to speak. It's fun.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, hey, thanks so much for being on the Friday Habit. This has been a very enjoyable conversation. I feel like I learned a lot. What we like to do is we kind of like to recap our conversation for our listeners. And Ben is a fantastic note taker. And so, Ben, what do you have for us as far as our top takeaways?
Well, you interrupted me. I was in the middle of pre-ordering the book, but I'll continue after I give you the takeaways. Yeah. No, it looks awesome, and I really enjoyed the conversation. I feel like you had you obviously have a lot of great methods that are really working for you guys and for other businesses. So I'm really excited to check out your book. Just a couple. I took a lot of notes. I'll just boil it down here. A couple things that stood out to me. I love what you said, that if you don't have difficult challenges, the wins don't feel as good. I.e., if you don't get dirty and cold in the woods, then showers aren't that great. You have to be a numbers person. You have to be a numbers person to run a successful business. I've seen that over and over. Like the people that really seem to thrive, love the numbers. It's like a game, and they like figuring out the numbers. You said build a model, then project it out, and project it out to see what it looks like if you get bigger, so you can kind of see if the model that you're creating now is actually scalable, which makes a lot of sense. You also mentioned if you want to win the Super Bowl, build a team of people who have won the Super Bowl before.
There you have it. Hey, if you could leave our listeners maybe with one action item, we kind of like to leave people with something. Hey, this next week, focus on this. What would that one thing be that you would leave our audience with?
Figure out what your sales or purchase cycle is, because I've seen the vast majority of people have no idea from the first time you introduce someone to your brand, they see an advertisement, they come in contact with your brand, to the time they purchase. Most people cannot tell you how long that period is on average, and is the most important thing you need to know in marketing, because as you spend on marketing, you need to watch that cycle to actually know what the returns are. You need to be nurturing the people throughout that period. That is literally number one to me, is that purchase cycle. People miss all the time. People have gotten way too direct response oriented and think that you spend money today, you make money today. So learn your purchase cycle so you can actually ascertain how things are going.
It's fantastic. All right. Hey, you guys, thanks so much for tuning in. Go to thefridayhabit.com to find show notes for this episode. There you can also find links to our websites and ways to get in touch. And at the bottom of the page, you can download our guide to the Friday Habit System that'll show you how to set aside one full day each week dedicated to working on your business instead of in your business.
And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a review in the Apple Podcast app. And if you have any questions or a topic you'd like us to cover, don't forget to record us a quick voice memo and send it to hello@thefridayhabit.com.
That's right. And until next time, live every day like it's Friday.